The message came on a Tuesday morning. It was not special in any way. The sun was rising over Seoul, and people were going to work, drinking coffee, and living their small, normal lives. Nobody knew that in a bunker 300 meters below the ground, a group of people were staring at a screen that would change everything. Captain Yoon Tae-ho stood at the center of the room with his hands behind his back. He was a tall man with a calm face and tired eyes. He had spent 20 years in the military, and 10 of those years had been spent in a place that did not officially exist. The room around him was filled with screens, blinking lights, and people who had not slept in 2 days. This was the heart of Earth's secret defense council, and today it had received its first real test. The message on the screen was short. It was written in a language that no human had created, but the translation software they had built over the last 15 years could read it perfectly. The words were cold and direct. Planet designation 7741C. You are hereby ordered to surrender all military capability and submit to the authority of the Dominion Fleet. You have 1 standard galactic cycle to comply. Failure will result in total annihilation. There will be no second warning. The room was silent. A young officer named Shin Eun-ji looked up from her desk. Her face was pale. She had joined the council only 6 months ago, and she had always believed that this day would never actually come. She had hoped it was all just a precaution, but the signal was real. It had come from beyond the solar system, from a fleet that was already moving toward them. Tae-ho read the message again. Then he read it a third time. His face did not change. He had known this was coming. They all had. For 15 years, Earth had been quietly watching the galaxy. They had found the wreckage of alien ships that had crashed on the planet over the centuries. They had studied the technology. They had listened to the signals that traveled between stars. And they had learned one very important thing. The galaxy was not a peaceful place. The Dominion was an empire that stretched across thousands of star systems. It was old, powerful, and cruel. Every species it found was given the same choice: kneel or die. Most species knelt. The ones that did not were turned to dust and forgotten. The Dominion had done this for so long that it no longer even considered the possibility of resistance. Conquest was not a war to them. It was a routine. Tae-ho turned to face his team. There were 12 people in the room, and each one of them was among the best that Earth had to offer. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, and strategists. They had been chosen not because they were famous or powerful, but because they could keep a secret. And Earth had a very big secret. How long do we have? Tae-ho asked. A man named Ko Jin-soo, the council's lead analyst, pulled up a series of numbers on his screen. He was a quiet man who wore glasses and spoke only when he had something useful to say. Based on the signal origin and standard Dominion fleet speed, they will reach our system in approximately 14 days. 14 days. Tae-ho let that number sit in the air for a moment. 14 days until the most powerful military force in the known galaxy arrived at their doorstep. 14 days to decide the fate of 8 billion people. Have they scanned us? Tae-ho asked. Yes, said another officer, a woman named Oh Min-ji. She was in charge of monitoring all incoming signals. Long-range scans. They have cataloged our population, our surface technology, and our basic military assets. Based on what they see, they have classified us as a Level 2 civilization. No significant threat. Tae-ho almost smiled at that. Almost. The Dominion had looked at Earth and seen exactly what Earth wanted them to see. They saw old fighter jets, aircraft carriers, and nuclear missiles. They saw a species that had not even left its own solar system. They saw weakness. They did not see what was hidden beneath the ocean. Contact Commander Han, Tae-ho said. The room moved quickly after that. Eun-ji opened a secure channel, that ran through a series of encrypted satellites that the rest of the world did not know existed. The signal traveled down through layers of rock and water until it reached a place at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, deeper than any submarine had ever gone. A voice answered. It was calm, steady, and belonged to a woman who had not seen the sky in 3 years. This is Commander Han Sujin. Sujin was sitting in a command chair inside a structure so large that it had its own weather system. The lights around her were dim and blue, and the hum of the engines beneath her feet was so deep that you could feel it in your bones, rather than hear it with your ears. She was 41 years old, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been chosen to command this vessel not because she was the most decorated officer, but because she was the most patient. And patience was what this job required. "Commander," Tejo said through the channel, "we have received the signal." There was a pause. Sujin had been waiting for these words for 3 years. She had trained her crew for this. She had run simulations 1,000 times. She had memorized every known Dominion battle formation, every weapon type, every tactical weakness that Earth's intelligence had been able to find. And now the moment had finally arrived. "Understood," she said. "Timeline? 14 days. Sujin leaned back in her chair and looked at the massive screen in front of her. It showed the outline of the vessel she commanded. It was 6 kilometers long. It carried over 40,000 crew members. It had weapons that the Dominion had never seen, built from their own technology, but redesigned by human engineers who thought differently, who solved problems in ways that no other species in the galaxy had ever considered. The ship was called the Guangeto. It had been built in secret over 12 years, assembled piece by piece at the bottom of the ocean, where no satellite could see it, and no signal could reach it. It was Earth's answer to a galaxy that believed strength was the only language worth speaking. Sujin pressed a button on her chair and spoke to her crew. Her voice echoed through every corridor, every room, every station on the massive ship. "All stations, this is the commander. We have received the signal. Begin full activation sequence. We have 14 days to prepare. I expect every system online and every crew member ready. This is what we trained for. This is why we are here." She released the button and sat quietly for a moment. Somewhere far above her, the ocean waves moved slowly in the dark. Somewhere beyond the solar system, a fleet of 10,000 warships was heading toward Earth, expecting to find another easy victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Guangeto had been sleeping for a long time. Not dead, not broken, just waiting. Like a heart that beats slowly in the dark, it had kept itself alive with the smallest amount of power, running only the systems that were necessary. Life support, basic gravity, and the deep sensors that watched the ocean around it. But now it was waking up, and the sound it made was like thunder buried under the sea. Commander Han Sujin walked through the main corridor of the ship. The lights above her were changing from dim blue to bright white as each section came online. Crew members moved quickly around her, not running, but not wasting a single step either. They had practiced this hundreds of times. Every person knew exactly where to go and what to do. There was no panic. There was only purpose. Lieutenant Park Do-hyun was waiting for her at the entrance to the main bridge. He was a young man, only 29, but he had been on the ship since he was 23. He had given 6 years of his life to this place, living underwater, away from his family, away from the world. He had missed birthdays, holidays, and funerals, but he had never once complained, because he understood what was at stake. "Commander," he said, falling into step beside her. "Primary reactor is at 60% and climbing. Weapon systems are in the final stages of diagnostic. Flight deck reports all 200 swarm fighters are fueled and ready for pre-launch checks." Sujin nodded. "And the gravity lance?" Do-hyun hesitated for just a moment. Engineering says they need another 48 hours for full calibration. The lance has never been fired outside of simulation. Chief Ryu wants to make sure the containment field holds under real conditions. Tell Chief Ryu he has 36 hours, Sujin said. Not a minute more. Do-Yun nodded and made a note on his tablet. He had learned a long time ago that when Sujin set a deadline, she meant it. She was not cruel about it, and she did not shout. She simply expected things to be done, and somehow they always were. The bridge of the Guangato was a wide circular room with a ceiling that curved upward like the inside of a dome. Dozens of stations were arranged in rings, each one staffed by an officer who controlled a different part of the ship. Navigation, weapons, communications, sensors, engineering, it was all here, connected by a network so advanced that it could process more data in 1 second than every computer on the surface of Earth combined. Sujin took her seat at the center of the bridge and looked up at the main display. It showed a map of the solar system, and at the edge of that map, a cluster of red dots was slowly moving inward. The Dominion fleet. 10,000 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to burn a continent. They moved in a formation that was tight and organized, the kind of formation that came from thousands of years of conquest. They did not spread out. They did not scout ahead. They simply came forward like a wall, because nothing had ever stopped them before. Sujin studied the formation for a long time. She had seen it in the intelligence files. The Dominion used the same approach for every invasion. They arrived in overwhelming numbers, surrounded the planet, and gave one final chance to surrender. If the planet refused, they opened fire. The whole process usually took less than a day. They are not creative, Sujin said quietly to herself. They do not need to be. They have never had to be. That was their weakness. Not in their ships, not in their weapons, but in their thinking. They had won so many times in the same way that they had forgotten how to adapt. They expected every battle to look the same, and Sujin was going to show them something they had never seen. She opened a channel to the lower decks. Chief Ryu, this is the commander. Status report on the stealth drive. A deep voice answered. It belonged to Ryu Tae-sun, the ship's chief engineer. He was an older man, somewhere in his 50s, with thick hands and a mind that could solve problems most people could not even understand. He had designed half the systems on the Guangato himself. Stealth drive is fully operational, Commander. We can run silent for up to 72 hours before the energy cells need recharging. As long as we stay below threshold speed, no known Dominion sensor can detect us. Good, Sujin said. Keep it ready. We launch in 12 days. She closed the channel and turned to Do-Hyun. Begin crew briefings. Every section, every team. I want everyone on this ship to understand what we are about to do. No secrets, no lies. They deserve to know. Do-Hyun agreed and left the bridge to begin organizing the briefings. Over the next several days, the entire crew of the Guangato was told the truth. They were told about the Dominion, about the message, about the fleet that was coming. They were told that Earth had no allies, no backup, and no second ship. They were told that the Guangato was the only thing standing between their planet and complete destruction. And then they were told the plan. The plan was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. The Guangato would rise from the ocean under full stealth. It would position itself in Earth's orbit and wait. When the Dominion fleet arrived and arranged itself for the standard invasion formation, the Guangato would strike first, hard and fast, using weapons the Dominion had never encountered. The goal was not to fight a long battle. The goal was to break them so quickly that they could not recover. The crew listened in silence. Some of them were afraid. That was normal, but not one of them asked to leave. Not one of them said they could not do it. They had spent years preparing for this, living in the dark at the bottom of the ocean, and they were not going to walk away now. On the 10th day, Sujin gave the order. The Guangetto began its ascent. The process was slow and careful. The ship rose through the water like a shadow, its stealth systems bending light and sound around it, so that nothing on the surface could detect its movement. Fish scattered, the water churned far below the waves, and then, after 3 hours of rising, the Guangetto broke through the surface of the Pacific Ocean and kept going. It rose into the sky without a sound. Its hull, dark and smooth, reflected nothing. Satellites passed overhead and saw only ocean. Radar stations detected only clouds. The Guangetto climbed through the atmosphere and slipped into orbit as quietly as a whisper. From the surface, nobody saw a thing. The world continued as it always had. People went to work, children went to school, the news talked about weather and politics and sports. Nobody looked up and wondered what was hiding among the stars. But it was there. 6 kilometers of metal, weapons, and human determination, hanging silently above the planet like a guardian that the world did not know it had. Sujin stood on the bridge and watched the earth below her through the main display. It was beautiful. Blue and green and white, turning slowly in the black. She had not seen it from this angle in 3 years, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel something. Not fear, not pride, just a quiet, heavy sense of responsibility. 8 billion more did not even know she existed. She turned away from the display and sat back in her chair. "All stations," she said. "We are in position. Go dark and wait." The lights on the bridge dimmed. The Guangetto went silent. And somewhere at the edge of the solar system, the red dots kept moving closer. The Dominion fleet arrived on the 14th day, exactly as the analysts had predicted. They came out of faster-than-light travel, just beyond the orbit of Mars, and when they did, every sensor on the Guangetto lit up like a fire. Lieutenant Park Do-hyun was the first to speak. "Contact confirmed. 10,216 vessels. They are holding position near the 4th planet and arranging into standard siege formation." Commander Han Sujin did not react immediately. She sat in her chair and watched the main display as thousands of red icons appeared on the map. The Dominion fleet spread out slowly, like a net being cast over the solar system. Their ships were massive, angular things covered in dark metal and glowing with energy lines that pulsed like veins. The largest of them, the command carriers, were nearly 2 kilometers long. They moved with the confidence of predators that had never known fear. On the surface of Earth, the world finally learned the truth. Governments that had been briefed in secret now made their announcements. Emergency broadcasts went out across every channel in every language. People stopped in the streets and looked at their phones. Some cried, some prayed. Some simply stood still and stared at the sky, trying to see something they could not yet see. But Sujin was not watching the Earth. She was watching the enemy. She studied their formation, their spacing, their movement patterns. She had memorized every known Dominion battle tactic, and what she saw now matched perfectly with what she expected. They were arranging themselves in a hemisphere around Earth, positioning their weapons to cover every angle. It was a formation designed for one thing: total bombardment. No escape, no defense, no hope. At least, that was what they believed. "They are hailing us," said Communications Officer Bakenari. She was a woman of 35, with steady hands and a voice that never wavered, no matter what was happening around her. She had been handling communications on the Guangetto for 4 years, and she had spent most of that time listening to alien signals and translating Dominion battle chatter. She knew how they spoke, how they thought, and how they gave orders. "Put it through," Sujin said. The voice that filled the bridge was deep and mechanical, translated in real time by the ship's systems. "Primitive species of planet 7741C. Your galactic cycle has ended. You have not surrendered. Prepare for judgment. Your cities will burn. Your people will kneel. This is the will of the Dominion." The bridge was quiet. Every officer sat at their station and waited. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. Sujin leaned forward slightly. "Nari, open a channel. Broadcast on all frequencies." Nari's fingers moved across her console. "Channel open, Commander." Sujin spoke clearly and without emotion. "This is Commander Han Sujin of the Earth vessel Gwanggaeto. We do not accept your terms. We do not recognize your authority. And we do not kneel. You have made a long journey to reach us. I am sorry to tell you that it will be your last." She paused for 1 second, then looked at Do-hyun. "Drop stealth." Do-hyun entered the command. The Gwanggaeto stealth field collapsed, and for the first time, the ship became visible. It appeared in Earth's orbit, like something born from the darkness itself. 6 kilometers of sleek, dark metal, bristling with weapon systems that the Dominion sensors could not even classify. It was larger than anything the Dominion had expected. It was larger than most of their own command carriers. And it had appeared out of nothing, right in the middle of their siege formation. The Dominion fleet reacted with confusion. Their communications channels exploded with chatter. Nari listened and translated in real time. "They are confused, Commander. Their sensors did not detect us until we revealed ourselves. They are trying to classify our weapon systems, and failing. The fleet commander is ordering all ships to hold position and assess." "They will not hold for long," Sujin said. "Launch swarm fighters, all 200. The order went out, and the belly of the Gwanggaeto opened. From launch bays that ran along the entire length of the ship, 200 small, fast fighters shot out into space like a swarm of silver insects. Each fighter was piloted by a crew of 2 and armed with pulse cannons that could cut through Dominion armor. They spread out in a wide pattern, moving so fast that the Dominion tracking systems could not lock onto them. The Dominion fleet commander made his decision. He ordered his ships to open fire. Thousands of energy beams lit up the darkness of space. They came from every direction, a wall of light aimed at the Gwanggaeto and its fighters. But the Gwanggaeto was already moving. Its engines pushed it sideways with a speed that should have been impossible for a ship of its size. And its shield systems absorbed the first wave of fire without a scratch. "Return fire," Sujin said. "All forward batteries." The Gwanggaeto's weapons came alive. Plasma cannons fired in rapid bursts, each shot punching through Dominion hulls like paper. Missile pods launched clusters of guided warheads that split into dozens of smaller projectiles. The swarm fighters dove into the gaps between enemy ships, firing their pulse cannons at engines and weapon systems, crippling vessels faster than the Dominion could respond. But the real weapon had not been used yet. Sujin watched the battle for exactly 4 minutes. She waited until the Dominion fleet pulled tighter together, clustering their ships in a defensive formation to protect their command carriers. It was a predictable move. She had counted on it. "Nari, target the center of their formation," Sujin said. "Gravity lance. Fire when ready." Nari looked at her console. Her hands were steady. She entered the targeting coordinates, confirmed the lock, and pressed the firing command. The Gwanggaeto shuddered. A sound moved through the ship, deep and heavy, like the heartbeat of something ancient. At the front of the vessel, a weapon that had never been fired in real combat activated. The gravity lance was not a beam or a missile. It was a focused pulse of gravitational force, so intense that it bent space itself. Chief Ryu Tae-sun had spent 7 years building it, and he had always said the same thing: "I hope we never have to use it." The pulse crossed the distance between the Gwanggaeto and the Dominion formation in less than 2 seconds. When it hit, it did not explode. It did something worse. The gravity in the center of the formation suddenly increased by a factor of 10,000. Ships that weighed millions of tons were pulled inward like leaves in a drain. Metal screamed and twisted. Hulls collapsed. 300 Dominion warships were crushed into each other in a space no larger than a small moon, folding and breaking apart in a silent, terrible display of force. The rest of the fleet stopped firing. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Dominion hesitated. Nari listened to the enemy channels. "Their communications have gone silent, Commander." The fleet commander's ship was in the center of the formation. "It has been destroyed. They have no central command." Sujin did not celebrate. She did not smile. She looked at the destruction on her screen and felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. This was not a game. These were lives, even if they belonged to an enemy that would have done the same to Earth without a second thought. But she could not stop now. "All ships, all fighters," she said. "Press forward. Do not let them regroup. Do not let them run. We end this now." The swarm fighters surged ahead. The Guangato followed, its weapons firing in every direction, tearing through the disorganized fleet like a blade through cloth. Dominion ships tried to flee, but the fighters cut off their escape routes. Others tried to surrender, broadcasting signals of submission that Nari translated with a grim expression. "Some of them are surrendering, Commander," she reported. "Accept their surrender," Sujin said immediately. "Any ship that powers down its weapons is not to be touched. We are not them. We do not destroy those who have given up." The battle continued, but it was no longer a battle. It was a collapse. The greatest military force in the galaxy was falling apart in front of a single ship from a planet they had dismissed as primitive and weak. And on the bridge of the Guangato, Commander Han Sujin sat in her chair and watched it all, carrying the weight of every decision, every shot, and every life lost on both sides. The battle lasted 17 hours. When it was over, the space around Earth was filled with wreckage. Broken ships drifted in silence, their lights dead, their weapons cold. Some still had crew alive inside, trapped in sealed compartments, waiting to be rescued or waiting to die. The Guangato moved through the field of debris slowly, like a whale moving through a graveyard. Commander Han Sujin had not left the bridge during the entire battle. Her eyes were red from staring at screens, and her body was stiff from sitting in the same chair for 17 straight hours. But she would not rest, not yet. There was still too much to do. Of the 10,000 Dominion warships that had come to conquer Earth, more than 6,000 had been destroyed. Another 2,000 had been crippled beyond repair. The remaining ships had either surrendered or fled into deep space with damaged engines, limping away from a fight they had never expected to lose. The Dominion's invasion fleet, the largest military force ever assembled against a single planet, had been broken by one ship. Lieutenant Park Do-hyun brought Sujin a cup of water. She took it without looking at him and drank it slowly. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. She had made more decisions in the last 17 hours than most commanders made in a lifetime, and every single one of those decisions had carried the weight of millions of lives. "Damage report," she said. Do-hyun pulled up the numbers. "We lost 14 swarm fighters, 31 crew members killed, 87 wounded. The portside armor took heavy fire during the third wave. Chief Reev says it will hold, but it needs repair before we can take another sustained assault. The gravity lance is offline. It overheated after the second firing, and the containment systems need to cool down. Estimated recovery time is 72 hours. Sujin closed her eyes for a moment. 31 dead. She would learn their names later. She would read every single one. But right now, she had to keep moving. And the enemy? Over 400 ships have powered down their weapons and are broadcasting surrender signals. Another 300 are drifting without power. We are detecting life signs on most of them. Begin rescue operations, Sujin ordered. Send shuttles to every drifting ship with life signs. Pull their crews out and bring them aboard. I do not care that they came here to destroy us. They are alive, and we will treat them with respect. Some of her officers exchanged glances. It was not a popular decision. These were the same beings who had planned to burn their cities and enslave their people. But Sujin's voice left no room for argument, and the order was carried out. On the surface of Earth, the world was in shock. Billions of people had watched the battle unfold through emergency broadcasts that showed sensor data and satellite images. They had seen the Dominion fleet arrive. They had seen the Guangaito appear from nowhere. They had watched as a ship they never knew existed fought a war on their behalf, and they had seen it win. The streets of every city were filled with people, crying, cheering, holding each other, staring at screens, unable to fully understand what had just happened. Captain Yoon Tae-ho, still in the underground bunker beneath Seoul, was on a secure channel with Sujin. His face was calm, but his voice carried a heaviness that had not been there before. He had spent the last 17 hours watching the battle from below, unable to do anything but wait and hope. "The world knows now," he said, "about the ship, about everything. There is no putting this back in the box." "I know," Sujin said. "The question is, what we do next." The Dominion is not just a fleet. It is an empire. Thousands of systems, millions of ships. What we destroyed today was their invasion force, but it was not their entire military. When word gets back to their home worlds, they will send more. Sujin had already thought about this. She had thought about it during the battle, between giving orders and watching ships burn. She had thought about what it meant to win a single fight against an enemy that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. It meant nothing if the enemy could simply send another fleet, and another, and another, until Earth was finally overwhelmed. But Sujin had also thought about something else. She had listened to the Dominion's communications during the battle. Nari had translated everything, and what she heard told a story that the Dominion did not want anyone to know. The Empire was not as strong as it appeared. Many of the species under its control were not loyal. They were afraid. They obeyed because they had no choice, because no one had ever shown them that the Dominion could be beaten. The Empire held itself together, not through loyalty, but through fear. And fear only works as long as no one proves it wrong. "Nari," Sujin said, "I need you to prepare a message. Broadcast it on every galactic frequency. Every channel the Dominion uses, every channel their subject worlds use. I want every species in this galaxy to hear it." Nari nodded and began working. Within minutes, she had prepared the broadcast equipment. The Guangaito's communication array was powerful enough to send a signal across the entire galaxy, bouncing it off relay stations that the Dominion itself had built. They would use the Empire's own network to deliver the message. Sujin sat up straight in her chair. She looked at the screen in front of her, at the wreckage, at the Earth below, at the stars beyond. And then she spoke. "This is Commander Han Sujin, of the planet Earth, broadcasting to all worlds under the control of the Dominion. 17 hours ago, a Dominion fleet of 10,000 warships came to our world to conquer us. That fleet no longer exists. We destroyed it. One ship, one planet, one species that the Dominion called primitive and weak." She paused and let the words travel. "We did not do this for conquest. We did not do this for power. We did this because we refused to kneel. And we are sending this message because we want you to know that you do not have to kneel either. The Dominion is not unbeatable. They told you that resistance was impossible. They lied. We are proof." She took a breath. "Earth remembers every species you enslaved. They are free now. Not because we freed them, but because the truth has been spoken. The Dominion can be defeated. What you do with that truth is your choice." The bridge was silent. Do-hyun stood at his station with his jaw tight, trying to keep his composure. Even Chief Ryu, who rarely came up from the engine rooms, had made his way to the bridge in time to hear the message. He stood by the door with his arms crossed, and his eyes wet. The message traveled at the speed of light, amplified by the Dominion's own relay network. It reached the nearest subject worlds within hours. It reached the outer systems within days. And wherever it arrived, it had the same effect. On a desert planet called Vareth, a species that had served the Dominion for 300 years shut down the mining operations they had been forced to run. On a water world in the Outer Arm, an entire population stopped paying tribute and sent their Dominion governors away in escape pods. On 100 worlds, then 1,000, the same thing happened. Not all at once, but the cracks had formed, and they were spreading. The Dominion had ruled through fear, and Earth had just shown the galaxy that there was nothing left to fear. Back on the Guangaito, Sujin allowed herself one moment of quiet. She looked at the Earth through the display, blue and bright, and still turning, and she felt the exhaustion finally hit her like a wave. She had done what she had been asked to do. She had protected her world. She had given the galaxy a chance. But the hardest part was still to come. The galaxy was watching Earth. Every species, every world, every government that had a way to point a sensor at the small blue planet in the Outer Arm was now looking at it. Some looked with hope. Some looked with fear. Some looked with hunger, already thinking about what kind of alliance or deal they could make with the species that had just defeated the Dominion in a single battle. Earth had gone from being unknown to being the most important planet in the galaxy, and that was exactly what Commander Han Sujin was afraid of. She sat in her chair on the bridge of the Guangaito, staring at the data on her screen. Messages were pouring in from across the galaxy. Dozens of species were trying to contact Earth, sending transmissions in languages that Nari and her team were working around the clock to translate. Some were simple and grateful. Thank you for showing us the truth. Others were more complicated. Offers of trade, offers of alliance, offers of technology in exchange for protection. And some were threats, barely hidden behind polite words, from Dominion loyalists who promised that the Empire would return and that Earth would pay for what it had done. Captain Yun Taeho contacted Sujin from the surface. He looked tired. She imagined he had not slept at all in the past 2 days. The world's governments were in chaos. The existence of the Guangaito was now public knowledge, and every nation on Earth wanted answers. Who had built it? Who had authorized it? Who had made the decision to keep it secret? Taeho was being called to answer questions that he had spent 15 years making sure nobody would ever think to ask. The world wants to know what happens next, Taeho said. I know, Sujin said. Some governments want us to use the ship. They want us to go out there and establish ourselves as a galactic power. They see this as an opportunity. Sujin shook her head slowly. That is exactly what we cannot do. Taeho looked at her through the screen. He did not argue. He had known Sujin long enough to know that when she said something with that tone, she had already thought it through completely. If we stay visible, Sujin continued, we become a target. Not just for the Dominion, but for everyone. Every species that wants our technology, every government that wants our protection, every empire that sees us as a threat. We have one ship, Taeho. One. And the galaxy has millions. We won this battle because they did not know we existed. The moment we become known, we lose that advantage. And the next fleet they send will be 10 times larger, and they will not make the same mistakes. Taeho was quiet for a long moment. Then what do you suggest? Sujin said. We disappear. The word hung in the air between them. Taeho leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. He understood what she was saying. He did not like it, but he understood it. The message has already been sent, Sujin said. Every species in the galaxy knows what happened here. They know the Dominion can be beaten. That is enough. That is the weapon that matters. Not the ship, not the gravity lance, not the fighters. The idea. The idea that resistance is possible. That will do more damage to the Dominion than we ever could with guns. She leaned forward. But if we stay here, parked in orbit, visible to everyone, we become a symbol that can be destroyed. And when they destroy us, and they will eventually, because we cannot fight the entire galaxy alone, that symbol dies with us. The idea dies. Every species that dared to stand up because of our message will lose hope again. But if we vanish, Tejo said slowly, beginning to see it. If we vanish, we become something they cannot destroy. A ghost. A legend. Every time the Dominion sends a fleet to punish a rebellious world, those people will look at the sky and wonder, is the Earth ship out there? Is it watching? Is it coming? The Dominion will have to wonder the same thing. They will have to guard every border, watch every system, waste resources looking for a ship they cannot find. The fear changes sides. Tejo stared at her for a long time. Then he nodded. The order was given quietly. There was no announcement. There was no ceremony. Sujin simply told her crew what was going to happen, and they accepted it the same way they had accepted everything else, with silence and trust. The rescued Dominion crew members were transferred to shuttles and sent down to Earth's surface. They would be treated well. They would eventually be returned to their own worlds, carrying their own stories about the humans who had defeated them and then saved their lives. Those stories would matter too. Officer Bakenari sent one final transmission, short and unencrypted, broadcast on every frequency. Earth stands. Earth remembers. Do not look for us. Then she shut down the communication array. Lieutenant Park Do-hyun walked through the ship one last time, checking every section, making sure every system was ready. He passed through corridors where crew members were securing their stations, packing away personal items, and preparing for a journey that had no destination and no timeline. Some of them were writing letters to their families, messages that would be sent to Earth before they disappeared. Do-hyun stopped at a window and looked out at the planet below. He pressed his hand against the glass and stood there for a full minute without saying a word. Chief Ryu Taesoon was in the engine room, running his hands over the stealth drive one last time. He had built this machine with his own hands, designed it from alien technology that he had spent years learning to understand. It was his greatest achievement, and it was about to carry 40,000 people into the unknown. He whispered something to the engine, too quiet for anyone to hear, and then he gave Sujin the green light. Sujin sat in her chair and looked at her crew. Every station was manned. Every light was steady. The bridge was calm and quiet, the way it always was before something important happened. "Activate stealth drive," she said. The Guangato shimmered. Its hull seemed to fold in on itself, bending light and energy around it, until it was no longer visible to any sensor, any eye, any technology in the known galaxy. One moment it was there, a 6-kilometer giant, hanging in orbit above the Earth. The next moment, it was gone. Just empty space and stars. On the surface, people who had been watching the sky saw it disappear. 1 second, there was a faint outline against the stars, and then there was nothing. News channels reported it immediately. Governments demanded answers. Satellites scanned every inch of orbit and found nothing. Deep space sensors searched the solar system and found nothing. The ship was gone. In the underground bunker beneath Seoul, Tejo watched the empty space on his screen where the Guangato had been. He sat alone in the room. The other council members had left hours ago, called away to deal with the political storm above. But Tejo stayed. He owed Sujin that much. He reached into his desk and pulled out a small photograph. It was old and worn at the edges. It showed a group of young officers standing in front of a construction site at the bottom of the ocean, smiling and covered in dirt. Sujin was in the photograph, 20 years younger, with longer hair and a smile that she rarely showed anymore. Tejo was standing next to her. They had been young then, full of hope and fear in equal measure, building something impossible because someone had to. He put the photograph back in the drawer and closed it. Across the galaxy, the effects of Earth's message continued to spread. Worlds that had been silent for centuries began to speak. Species that had been crushed into submission began to organize. The Dominion sent fleets to restore order, but for the first time, their fleets hesitated before entering battle. Every commander looked at the darkness of space and wondered the same thing. Was the Earth ship out there, watching, waiting? The answer was that nobody knew, and that was exactly the point. Somewhere in the vast, endless blackness between stars, the Guangetto moved in silence. Its lights were off. Its engines were quiet. 40,000 human beings traveled through the dark, unseen and unknown, carrying with them the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. Not a missile, not a gravity lance, a question. Where did they go? The galaxy would spend a very long time trying to answer it.